Welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bree and I am currently pregnant. I have PCOS, I am plus size, and I have a high risk pregnancy. And I am sharing my pregnancy journey on YouTube in the hopes that it helps others going through a similar situation. And in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about my first prenatal visit as a high-risk pregnancy or with a high-risk pregnancy, and kind of tell you what to expect. Whether or not you are high risk, your first prenatal visit is going to be very similar to how mine was. The only thing that really was different for me in this visit versus a normal person who is pregnant and having a perfectly healthy normal pregnancy and not considered high risk is just the conversations that I had with my OBGYN. Literally everything else was the same. So let's talk about what to expect. So I had my first appointment when I was 7 weeks pregnant. I was 7 weeks and 1 day pregnant. And I did get in to see an OBGYN a little earlier than a normal person because I am high risk. So they brought me in a little sooner than they would have brought in a normal person. So honestly, this appointment was a lot. It was incredibly overwhelming, especially for me because this is my first pregnancy and I did not know what to expect. So a little bit of how it worked though is my husband and I got there. I checked in at the front desk. I had filled out all the paperwork in advance, so I just handed them a packet of my paperwork, let them have my ID and my insurance card, and then they showed me where the bathroom was and had me pee in a cup. Once I was done with that, I sat in the waiting room and waited to be called back. When I got called back the first time, it was by an ultrasound tech, and she took me back into a room and told me that they were going to do an ultrasound to see the baby, see where baby had implanted, check for a heartbeat, all that good stuff. And she also told me that because I was so early in pregnancy that it would be a transvaginal ultrasound, where they have a special ultrasound wand that they insert into your vagina and look at the baby through your cervix, essentially. So that piece of the pregnancy is pretty normal. Regardless of whether or not you have a high risk pregnancy, if you go in at that early of a gestational age, like less than 12 weeks gestational age for the baby, you're most likely going to get a transvaginal ultrasound. So that's something that I did not know, that I was not expecting, but I sucked it up and I did it anyways. And I felt very vulnerable and weird. I was really nervous. My husband was there and I wasn't nervous to like be in that position in front of him, obviously, but it was just an awkward situation, and you know how it is if you've never been in it and done stuff like that before. But you know, it was a very similar experience to having to go in and do like your yearly pap smear if you've ever done one of those. So it was sort of comparable to that. Anyways, the ultrasound tech was incredibly nice. She did make me feel a little better. She was able to see the baby and seen that little bean had implanted very good in there. Baby was like in a good spot in the uterus, and baby had a heart rate of 110 that day, which they said was good. The only thing that anybody ever mentioned was that baby was measuring at 6 weeks 1 day gestational age, and based off the date of my last period, I was 7 weeks and 1 day gestational age. So that freaked me out, but they didn't seem too concerned with it at all. So it just kind of was what it was. After that ultrasound, I went back to the waiting room and waited in there for a little while longer. And then I got called back again. The next time it was by a nurse, and she checked me in and done all of my like vitals, like height, weight, blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen level, all that good stuff. And then we went and sat in a room and we went over all of my health history, all of the medications that I was taking prior to pregnancy, everything that I continued taking since I had been pregnant. And she got all that information put in my chart and then walked away and said that the doctor would be in shortly. So I met my OBGYN for the first time, was the next thing that happened. She did tell me that she wanted to do a vaginal exam before we really got into anything. So she had me undress, like completely undressed, and then I had to wear like a little cloth like gown. And she did a vaginal exam with a pap smear because I hadn't had one done this calendar year. I wasn't technically due for one until December, but I went to this appointment in August. So I had a pap smear done. She felt of both of my breasts and checked those. It was like literally just like a pap smear appointment would have been. And then she let me get dressed. She stepped out of the room and let me get dressed, and then she came back in and we talked about everything that I had talked about with the nurse previously. So she handed me a huge packet of paperwork, and in that packet of paperwork there was tons of informational things. It had like a list of medications that you could take when you were pregnant that were safe to take during pregnancy and breastfeeding. She gave me paperwork about the hospital that I am required to deliver at per my health insurance's requirement. So she gave me paperwork on that, how to do birthing classes at the hospital, how to pre-register for the hospital, if I wanted to schedule a tour of the hospital and all that good stuff. It had all kinds of information like that in there. It had information about special ultrasounds that you could opt to do at their office, like an early gender ultrasound. It had information about early gender blood work tests. It had a ton of information. I still to this day have not read through that entire packet of information. So need to do that, but probably not going to do that at this point in my life. So after that, we talked about my medical history. We went through my list of medications, and she told me, I changed what I was taking when I found out that I was pregnant, obviously, but she went through that list again and just confirmed whether or not those things were safe to take or whether or not she wanted me to change them. So we talked about that, my medical history, and then we mostly talked about my high risk factors. And I do have 2 high risk factors because of my health history, number 1, but also if you are overweight or obese when you're pregnant, you are also at a high risk for these couple of health factors or high risk things or whatever you want to call them. So regardless, pretty much, and I asked this question too, I was like, well, this wasn't my intention to get pregnant at this point in time. I wanted to lose weight. I lost about 50 pounds, like a couple of ounces less than 50 pounds before I went on vacation and ended up getting pregnant. And I had intended to lose quite a bit more, and it didn't happen. But I asked her, I was like, would I still have been considered high risk even if I would have been at a more optimal weight at the beginning of this pregnancy? And she said yes, because of my health history and because of the fact that I was ever this big to begin with, and because of the fact that I had, even if I didn't have pre-diabetes, then because I have had it in the past and because I have had high blood pressure in the past, they still would have treated me the exact same and would have considered it high risk regardless. So we talked about all that stuff, and my two high risk factors are preeclampsia and gestational diabetes. So she gave me information on what she wanted my blood pressures to be. We talked about optimal ranges for blood pressure and talked about doing a log of them, checking it 3 times a day, all that good stuff. And then we talked about my blood sugar. She told me that she wanted my blood sugars to be below or at 95 or below 95 fasting, and that they needed to be below 140 after eating a meal. So I'm supposed to check my blood sugar 4 times a day. I check it fasting first thing in the morning, and then I check it after every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I record it on a sheet. And every time I go in for an appointment, I bring that log of my blood pressures and my blood sugars so they can keep a really close eye on that stuff. The last thing that we really talked about was her referring me out to a fetal and maternal medicine doctor. And a fetal maternal medicine doctor is essentially a high-risk pregnancy doctor. They do not deliver babies, but they manage high-risk conditions that you have in pregnancy. So she referred me out to a high-risk doctor and really just talked about the lab and blood work and stuff that she wanted to run on me. And that was pretty much the end of that appointment. On my way out, I stopped by the lab. I let them do a ton of blood work. It was I want to say 8 or 9 vials of blood that they took, more than I've ever had taken at any other appointment. And then they gave me a jug to do a 24-hour urine collection in. And they scheduled me my next appointment with the OBGYN. My next appointment was scheduled for 2 weeks out because in the ultrasound that day, baby had measured at 6 weeks 1 day, and I was 7 weeks 1 day based off my last period. So they scheduled an ultrasound 2 weeks later just to recheck growth of baby. And that was not explained to me in my initial conversation with the OB. That was something that was explained to me when I handed the checkout desk lady this piece of paper from the OB, and she told me all that stuff and got me scheduled for another appointment 2 weeks later. So for the next 2 weeks, I was freaking out and asking every pregnant person that I know and people that have recently had babies if I should be concerned that the baby was a week behind. And most everybody was like, well, if they weren't concerned about it, then you shouldn't be concerned about it. So that, of course, it kind of made me feel better, but it kind of didn't. I still freaked out for the next 2 weeks, and it just kind of was what it was. But yeah, anyways, that was everything that happened in my first prenatal visit. Pretty much the same thing is going to happen to anybody in their first prenatal visit. The only thing that was different for me was the 24-hour urine collection. They don't do on everybody. They do it on people who are at a high risk for preeclampsia. And the referral to a fetal maternal medicine doctor, they're only going to do if you were high risk in pregnancy. So other than that, if you are having a perfectly healthy, normal pregnancy, you can expect to go through a very similar situation when you go for your first prenatal visit. So, that is everything that I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you would like to continue on and continue to watch my pregnancy journey, make sure that you like and subscribe and follow all that good stuff, and I will see you all in the next video.